Hello and welcome to a Minnesota Banking Minute. I'm Diane Brower with the Minnesota Bankers Association. Today I'm here with Matt Bry from the Blanchard Consulting Group. Matt, you recently surveyed 163 banks on how COVID-19 has impacted their compensation programs. What did you uncover that banks did with staffing during the pandemic, and what are their plans for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, thanks, Diane. As you mentioned, we did a survey of 163 community and regional banks. Certainly a strong presence in the Midwest. And we asked specifically, what were you doing from a staffing standpoint? And not surprisingly, banks kind of seemed to have followed the rules as what, was recommended in the various states. Actually, about 86% of the banks said that they did reduce their, in-branch or in-office staff, but they didn't cut any of those staff. So they just had people working from home, didn't mess with their head counts. And had those people, obviously not in the branches, not in their offices. About 12% actually didn't do anything. So, they actually just operated as normal. My guess is it depends on what state they were in and whether they had, some of the rules and regs with COVID-19 on that front. So banks didn't overreact, kind of did what you'd expect, and certainly didn't reduce staff on that end of things. Now, we also asked what they were going to do kind of for a future standpoint, as far as hiring or staffing, and about 42% said they were just going to be cautious, and they didn't say they were specifically doing anything. Only 10% said they had a hiring freeze in place. So there wasn't a lot of movement there. I think it's kind of a wait and see approach on the staffing, and again, not surprisingly, banks didn't overreact.
When it comes to salaries and bonuses and incentives, what did you see?
Yeah, so we asked specifically, what were banks doing with their salary levels? Were they making any changes? Were they increasing, decreasing, any of those types of things? 80% said they didn't do anything. So they weren't changing it at all. They were kind of staying status quo. We had about just over 10% that said they were thinking about maybe making adjustments, but hadn't done anything yet. And then just about 7% said they actually increased their salary rates, which is probably surprising. There was only 1% of the banks that said that they had actually decreased any hourly rates or any salary levels. And so the interesting thing is with some of the government regulations and the PPP programs, there were certain areas of the bank, specifically SBA lending, they were actually more busy than what they would normally be. And so that probably points to, maybe a few of them actually increasing some rates, but not much on that. Pretty much status quo on salaries. When we talked about bonuses, first thing we asked were you doing anything special because of COVID or anything like that? We did get about just over 35%. I think it was 36% that said they were doing something with special bonuses. My guess is, again, that was kind of in the PPP programs or some of those SBA lending programs that the banks were doing. The people in those areas maybe got kind of a one-time bump or a one-time bonus that they were able to put in place. So a little bit of a surprise there. When you think everybody's being impacted negatively, that wasn't necessarily the case in the banking environment. As far as their specific incentive plans, the bulk of the banks, they were conducting business as normal on their incentive plans. So they're kind of taking a wait and see approach. There's about 62% that we're just continuing on as if nothing, was happening, and we'll wait and see what happens. About 28% said they were in discussions about whether they would maybe suspend their 2020 plan or whether they'd make some adjustments. And then there's obviously a few of them that did suspend it, but not any sort of high numbers in those areas. So most were kind of taking a wait and see approach. Let's see where, how we do financially, and then make some adjustments there.
Do you have any advice for the banks for their 2020 incentive plans or their 20 and 21 compensation programs?
Yeah, I think it kind of echoes what I just said. I think in 2020, it's a little bit of a wait and see how your incentives are turning out. Don't be afraid to make a discretionary adjustment. We would always say in your incentive plan, don't be afraid to have, discretionary adjustments for extraordinary items. We certainly would consider this an extraordinary event. So I think it's just a matter of kind of hanging in there, seeing where you are ending up towards the fall, towards the end of the year, and then don't be afraid to make some adjustments if it feels right and makes sense. As far as 2021 goes, I think we'll take a look at, what's kind of the new norm, and then don't be afraid to make adjustments. Just because we had an incentive plan that was similar in let's say 2017 through 2019 and even 2020, things may not be the case in 2021. And so take a look at your goals, for next year when you have a little bit better feel for this year, and then make those adjustments where it makes sense.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. That was very interesting. Thanks for sharing your information.
You bet. Anytime.